Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Mansueto. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Product of the Month event. Today we're going to take a look at Pacejet Cloud for Sightline, leveraging the cloud to combat rising shipping costs. Today's presenter is going to be Larry DeLeon. Larry is the president and co-founder of Pacejet. Following 8 years as part of the Sightline senior management executive team, Larry helped to create Pacejet in 2003. And today, Pacejet is the leading multi-carrier cloud shipping platform for mid-market manufacturers and distributors. Folks, at the end of Larry's presentation, we will take some time for question and answers. During the presentation, you'll all be muted, but you'll have the ability to submit your questions through the chat panel, which is over on your right. So please submit those as we go, and then I'll read those off at the end for Larry to address. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Larry.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, this is Larry. Appreciate your time this morning. I'm assuming, Joe, that everyone can see the screen that we have on So, yes, I've been with Pacejet, or have helped start Pacejet in 2003, and a lot of us are former Sightline management executives, and over the years we've developed an application focusing on shipping. Today, we deliver a cloud-based offering. We're one of the leading mid-market cloud application servicing the distributors and manufacturers, and one of our key partners is Sightline. Today, what we're going to talk about is the rising shipping costs and how cloud can really address a number of key trends that are happening in the marketplace today. But just stepping back a second, sometimes it's important to realize just how much transportation spend is a part of your overall costs. And I'm sharing a slide that I obtained from Stifel Capital Markets. They have a logistics specialty. They're a financial holdings company. They did a presentation in December that I thought had some interesting aspects as it relates to transportation spend. What's clear is that nearly half of all companies' transportation spend is at least 4% of total revenue, and that's a pretty significant cost category. Assuming you're a $50 million revenue company and you're spending 4% per year on your transportation, that's nearly $2 million of transportation spend. And let's say you're able to take that $2 million and you're able to save 5%, that's a $100,000 savings. Now, what's really happening here in the focus of this presentation is that these costs will continue to rise at a higher rate than many of your other cost categories. And this is something that really should be a key focus for you. And the other thing to consider is, this can also expand into inbound. So oftentimes you have both outbound spending and inbound. If you're dealing with your carriers, to be able to negotiate tariffs that consider both inbound and outbound can be significant. The interesting trend, and this is something that I also got from the Stifel Capital Markets, they did a survey of about 800 companies with transportation spend of at least $1 million. And they also interviewed carriers, and it's interesting to note, if you look at the bottom of this graph, 37% of the shippers said their primary focus when it deals with transportation is to reduce costs. At the same time, carriers are looking at it and thinking, well, no, only about 14%. And instead, what they're focusing on now, and I'll highlight this in the next slide, but they're focusing on, because of increased demand and stresses on their capacity, they're focusing on asset utilization and also maximizing profitability. So clearly, the trend of shippers trying to reduce cost is in conflict with carriers that are focused on maximizing their asset utilization in the field. There are really, what I'd say, 3 trends that are impacting your freight spend, and I separated it between parcel and truck, but they're all the same, really. The first one is both parcel and truck are experiencing significant increase in demand, and it continued to grow. And from a parcel perspective, the key driver is the e-commerce boom. There's more and more carriers are being used to ship e-commerce. The impact of Amazon, eBay has been significant. So there's a lot of demand that's being pushed out into the parcel marketplace. The same goes for truck. The truck market continues to increase. In fact, I think over the last 5 years, the truck freight spend for LTL has increased probably 46%, close to that. But at the same time, they're experiencing shortages in drivers, and so they have a capacity issue. So therefore, they're becoming much more selective in the freight, and you're going to see that translate over time into increased costs for trucking, and particularly in the LTL market. The second key aspect of shipping trends is the pricing model is changing, and this has a huge implication for shippers. In the parcel world, everyone got received an announcement, and now it's in place, and carriers are negotiating some of this, but it's a trend that's in place and will continue to be a key focus for these carriers, and that is called dim pricing. And basically, what they're doing is they're charging for the capacity of the box dimensions as opposed to the weight. So the dim weight, which is really the build weight, is now can now exceed what the actual weight is. So it's interesting because in effect what you're doing, the expensive commodity here is air. So what the carriers are trying to do is they're trying to eliminate the unused portion of the box, or they're going to charge for it. So air is a very expensive commodity for a shipper. The same thing is happening in LTL. You're not seeing it as rapidly as you are in the parcel, but in the next 2 to 3 years, it's probably going to become a standard, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But they're going away from the commodity classification approach, and they're going to be using density-based pricing, where they take the cubic and the weight, very similar to the parcel, and then calculate what the freight charge will be. Then the third key area is, as a result of all these changes, the increased demand, the limited capacity, the increase in pricing, you're seeing more and more alternatives to consider. United States Postal Service is really surging recently for the small package delivery. You're seeing more and more regional carrier, parcel carrier options popping up and offering an option to the UPS and FedEx parcel shipping. And then also from an LTL perspective, you're seeing a large increase in what we call third-party logistics providers or brokers, or you're seeing trends in market exchanges where shippers will see additional options in terms of which carriers to select. So the key thing on here is increased demand, changing in pricing to dimensional rating, and then increased options. Now, of course, as from a Pacejet perspective, our focus here is being able to connect directly to the carriers. So the advantage of a cloud application as a result of being able to connect to these carriers, we're providing a real-time integration with the single user interface. So you can select from multiple carriers, and then also having a streamlined flow for packaging information, which packaging is now becoming more and more important as it relates to shipping cost. And this is how Pacejet plays into this, into these cost trends. And we'll do a quick flow of a process from a freight quote from Sightline in a little bit, but this is where we're connecting, the shippers and the carriers to the cloud, and addressing these trends that the shippers are going to see. Okay, so let's just talk about parcel shipping for a second. A couple interesting notes. UPS and FedEx distribution network is being flooded with these e-commerce shipments. Everyone is now buying directly from a commerce website, so all of a sudden these single packages are showing up in the network, and many of them are not packaged properly, and there's a lot of air in these packages, and the impact of the new dim weight pricing is being debated, but it's somewhere, in addition to the 4.9% that FedEx and UPS introduced in 2015, the impact of the dimensional rating could be as much as 25% or more, depending on how the shippers are packaging. The issue that the parcel shippers are facing relative to the dimensional impact of the smaller shipments is now that you're seeing additional options grow, and the United States Postal Service is actually increasing its market share for 5 pounds and under, and really with a focus on residential delivery. And everyone hears about the losses that United States Postal Service has been realizing, and they continue to realize losses, but they're really more related to the retiree pre-funding and the retiree benefits. But if you exclude those costs, the Postal Service now is in an operating profit. The first 4 months of their fiscal year through January, they realized $1.3 billion of operating profit, which is $400 million better than they thought. So the United States Postal Service is definitely a beneficiary of this increased demand. The other thing that's happening is everyone is trying to figure out how to provide low-cost final delivery. So they call it the final mile home delivery. And you're seeing UPS, SurePost, and FedEx SmartPost, and offerings such as Nugistics partnering with the United States Postal Service to do distribution where the final delivery is handled by the United States Postal Service, but the pickup portion is handled by the parcel carriers. So here's an example of dim rating and why it's important. So let's take a box that's 10 inches by 11.5 by 15 inches, and the way you calculate it is you do a cubic inch calculation. So you calculate the cubes of that box, and then the UPS and FedEx use a dim factor of 166. So the weight, the dim weight, is considered 10.8 pounds, and what they'll do is they'll round that up to 11 pounds. So this package will be rated as 11 pounds, even if the actual weight is 8 pounds. And so, you may think that you're being, you're shipping based on 8 pounds, but when it goes to the UPS or FedEx system, they're going to rate it as 11 pounds. The implications of this is that packaging has become extremely important, making sure you pick the proper box size. You need to make sure that you're not wasting dunnage, which is the packing material you use to put in a box. You may want to consider on your smaller packages things like envelopes. Envelopes are not yet subject to the dim pricing, so if you've got smaller packages, you can put them in envelopes. That's also a potential cost savings. And then also, this is another example where, evaluating additional carrier options will give you some leverage. Now, the reality is you can probably negotiate with the carriers now some aspect of this. But over time, they're going to be continuing to squeeze this, and this is going to be an example of where price increase is not reflected in the stated price increase, but more in the packaging. So what I'm going to ask, I'm going to have Luke. He's going to just do a sample flow and show you the impact of dim. He's going to do a freight quote off of the sideline sales order for a parcel order, and then just show an example how dim pricing can work.
Okay, so for this rating example, I'm going to start within the customer orders form within Sightline. You can see on the lines here I have 5 of my padded bike seats. When I'm ready to reach out to my various carriers and get rates for this particular order, I can hit this rate icon, and Pacejet is going to pop up. Now, I've been logged out for a little bit, so it's going to ask me to re-log in. And what we've brought over is all of the necessary shipping information directly from Sightline. So the ship from, the ship to, as well as the fact that this entire order weighs about 12 pounds. Now I can actually expand my package information and see that this is going in a 10 by 6 by 8 box. Now if we do our dim rate calculation, the 12 pounds will actually be higher than the dim weight, so we will be rating on that 12-pound factor. And when I want to get my rates from all my carriers, I can hit this rating icon, and it's going to pop over, and it's going to show me my UPS rates, my FedEx rates, we even have some LTL rates, and then some parcel services. But we have highlighted UPS, and we've chosen UPS ground for this order. That's Pacejet's way of showing me that UPS, and UPS ground specifically, is the lowest cost option for this particular shipment. Now I can go over and I can look at my different FedEx rates. Even if I am shopping around, I can always see that UPS has my lowest cost choice. I can see arrival dates, as well as the cost to me as the shipper. Now this cost for UPS ground is going to be $11.03, and you can see we factored in a percentage markup for our customer as well. So we can see that we're actually going to be charging the customer $18.57 for this order. Now let's go down, take the same shipment, and I'm going to put it into a different box size. Now this box has dimensions of 16 by 16 by 16. Our weight is still the same, but now the dim rate calculation, I believe, is around 25 pounds. So when we go through, we'll still rate this shipment. It's going to ask all of our carriers based for rates on our negotiated rates. UPS ground still comes as the lowest cost option, but you can see now it's almost $15. So there's about a 30% increase on this shipment alone, just based on a different box being used, even though it's the same weight. So by knowing my different packages and having Pacejet automatically calculate the dim rates for me, I'll be able to have an accurate measure of what I'm actually paying for this shipment. When I do choose a carrier and a class of service, I can go back into Sightline. I can just let this order refresh quickly. And we can go up into my order notes, where you'll see Pacejet has let me know that I quoted and chose UPS ground for this order, and we know the cost both to me and the cost to my customer.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. So that was an example of parcel. Let me talk just a little bit about LTL. And this is a slide I got from a presentation from a company called Carrier Direct. We actually work with them. They're consulting in the transportation space. And here's the key trend that they're seeing relative to LTL carriers, which will directly impact you as a shipper. The first is, as I mentioned to you before, is right now they've got plenty of freight based upon their truck capacity and also their driver capacity. So they're becoming much more selective in the lanes that they choose. And so you're going to start seeing pricing pressure, maybe not on your primary lanes, but let's say in some of the less traveled lanes, or it could be type of freight that they may not want to handle. Maybe the more bulky freight they'll try to price away from. So you're probably going to see that trend over the next a couple of years. The other thing is the driver shortage is going to be impacting the LTL carriers. And the third trend or relative to the LTL carriers I found very interesting, and that is the technology trend. And they're using more and more using the benefits of technology to connect to shippers and connect to services. But they're also using new what they call dimensioners, being able to calculate dimensions on a pallet and a skid, and using that for the pricing. Now, it's interesting. They see three key points relative to this. One is the dimensional pricing, which I mentioned to you before. It's similar to parcel, but it's based upon the size of the pallet. They're less concerned about what's in a box, but more concerned about what's on a pallet. And I'll talk a little bit about dynamic pricing, which is really, instead of contract pricing, they're going to want to move to more, pricing for that day, based upon their availability, and then also from a real-time information gathering, they're connecting to carriers and they're connecting to their drivers. So it's a much more connected world, and they're all using web services connections to do this. But as a result of this, they're predicting that there's going to be some pretty significant changes resulting in carriers being much more selective in the pricing and much more, it's going to have an impact on your freight spend significantly over the next couple of years. The other aspect, as I mentioned to you before, is the driver shortage. I found some of these statistics very, very interesting. The average age today of a truck driver is, I think, 51 years of age, and the driver life expectancy is early 60s. So there is going to be an exit of drivers over the next few years. It's a real problem for the industry. Pay is going to have to continue to adjust. As the drivers needed over the next 10 years is per year, so they need 96,000 drivers every year, and their average turnover rate is 95%. So you can imagine that this is a significant issue, and it's primarily related to long-haul drivers, and the pickup and delivery is less of an issue. But as a result of the long-haul drivers, it does impact LTL because they have to ship across country. And I also think you're going to see an impact relative to the rail industry as more and more long hauls are going to be handled by the rail as opposed to trucking. So let's talk about what the new density pricing looks like. Now, in the old day, or not the old days, today, the National Motor Freight Classification issues a book, and it has all these commodity codes. It's been around for 50-plus years. It's kind of lost its connection to reality because you have all these carriers and shippers applying for specific codes. Basically, you look up a type of item, and it tells you the code and tells you what the class is, and there's like 18 classes, and based upon the class, it will rate your shipment, and the higher the class, the more expensive it is. And the class system is supposed to reflect density, stowability, handling, and liability, but it's archaic, and the LTL carriers are wanting to get away from it because they want to focus on cube and dimensions. So what you're seeing is these machines that are dimensioners be able to calculate the dimensional rating, and then they translate it into the 18 class codes. So for an example, you have a shipment weighing 705 pounds. That's a cubic value of 106 cubic feet. So the density factor is 6.65, and you round that up to 7. That results in the freight class 125. So all this maintaining of the different class codes and everything will be around for a while. People will negotiate them in, but you're seeing more and more LTL carriers, and particularly like the YRCs of the world and so forth, they're installing this equipment, and they're going to be focused on converting to freight that's going to be calculated based upon density. And just like in the parcel industry, it can have a significant impact. If you take that one step further, once you're able to do density-based calculated shipments, and there are LTL carriers today that have their drivers carry mobile devices where they can actually rate a shipment right there on the dock. But as this capability expands, and you can ignore this static commodity code classification and you move toward this density calculation, then the carriers are talking about wanting to offer spot rate pricing. So if you're familiar with the truckload industry today, you can put out bids for your long hauls, which is a per miles, and people will bid on it. Well, you're going to see something similar for the LTL carriers as they try to match their pricing more on a daily basis based upon the demand versus some negotiated class code. So what I've asked Luke to do is just do a sample LTL rating, and he's going to do that. Now, this doesn't have the density-based rating, but there's a couple points that we're going to highlight relative to doing an LTL shipment. One is the options, and then the other is the importance of knowing what your pallet information is and how you can manage that.
So I'm using my shipping workbench as we come through, and I have just a number of different orders that are ready to be shipped out. What I want to do is actually search for a specific order, and I can open that up, and I can see in my shipment details that this is actually 3 pallets, about 750 total pounds. So I know this is going to be an LTL shipment. However, maybe at the time of shipping, I can recognize that I can actually fit this whole order onto 2 pallets. What I can do is open up my packing screen, and I can see system thinks I'm going to pack 2 systems on 2 pallets, and then the 5th computer system here onto the 3rd pallet. But at the time of shipping, I found I can fit 3 systems onto a pallet, so I'm going to actually drag that 3rd system up. That leaves us with an empty pallet. Remember, it's done. I can delete this last pallet off because we're not going to use it, and hit recalculate weight, and I now have correct weights for both my pallets. When I go through and actually rate this, just as we had before, this time, however, LTL and X-Freight, which is one of our 3PL broker type options, will show up as my lowest cost options. I still have some FedEx rates, as you'll see I have some FedEx freight options. I have my X-Freight options. In this case, I'm contracting directly with the 3PL, and they're leveraging their network and their discounts and giving me a number of different options. They'll still bill me directly, but depending on my volumes or my contract, their options might be the lower cost. In this case, clear lane freight systems through X-Freight, that's going to be my lowest cost choice. Or I can go over to my LTL options. You can see I work with 3 direct LTLs in this case, Estes, Conway, and Old Dominion, and I might override that choice of the lowest of the clear lane systems. I also want to point out you can see a freight cost here of $693. Let's say at the time of shipping, I realized I needed to add a lift gate. Maybe my contracts with the different carriers have a separate charge for a lift gate accessorial, so I can add that and re-rate. This time FedEx Freight, they're not going to offer me any options with lift gates, so we've actually cut our options down to just LTL and X-Freight again. Clear lane still comes up as the lowest cost option, but you can see with Estes, which I'll still override, the cost is now $738. So you can see we had about a $35 lift gate charge associated with that. So we'll send that information to the carriers. They'll send back the correct rates based on our contracts. And then I can actually choose the carrier, which will bring me to this confirmation screen. So we'll update Sightline. It will also create and print a bill of lading for me automatically. If this were a small parcel shipment, we get our UPS or FedEx labels. We also have a packing list we've created. This is done automatically by the system.
Thanks, Luke. Luke, do me a favor. Can you just show a report? We have a shipment summary report that can also then look at how you viewed your options.
Absolutely. So on a high level, Pacejet is going to keep track of all of my choices and all of my shipments. It's going to let me know what my entire freight spend for this year might be or this week. You can actually break down and see that I've shipped 45% of my shipments with UPS, 12% with Estes. And what that lets us do then is break down the reports even further. So for example, we have this shipment savings report. Now I'll take it from, let's say, October 1st of last year, all the way up until today. I'll run this report, and it's going to come back, and this particular report lets me know every time that I selected the lowest cost option or the recommended carrier. It also lets me know every time I overrode that choice and chose a more expensive carrier like we just did today. And it can show me that I could have saved about $78,000 since October 1st by always choosing the lowest cost option.
So obviously in our demo system, we're continuing to choose the highest carrier.
So, and then it will come down, it will actually show me all of the report, or all of the different shipments where I chose, where I overrode that lowest cost option.
Okay, thanks, Luke. So just wrapping up with a few final slides, just to make sure we get the final point across. Again, as a result of these trends, this is where cloud really has a place in this environment. Cloud is becoming more and more the wave of the future of systems. Now, you may have an on-premise ERP system, and so a hybrid approach can make sense. You know, the perfect examples of typical hybrid deployments of cloud is someone like maybe Salesforce. That's obviously been a very successful CRM application where you're connecting to the cloud. Another one is Avalara, where you do cloud connection for sales tax. Connecting to carriers is an obvious deployment for the cloud, because you want to connect real time. So, you know, the key benefits from a Pacejet deployment perspective using it in the cloud, we're giving you more options. As a result of giving you more options, you can shop. You can do a better job of you know, talking with your carriers. I've had customers tell me they just share the rating screen with the carrier, and it improves their pricing negotiations significantly. So because now at every shipment you can do a price comparison, plus you can run the reports. The second key factor relative to the Pacejet application is integrated with your ERP. It allows packaging information to flow through. It allows you to edit the packaging information. And as I talked about this in this presentation, packaging is becoming critical when it comes to calculating freight costs. And then, obviously, the last key point is because you have this data, you're able to make informed decisions to, you know, select your carriers and decide how you're going to use it. You're going to need to have as much information when talking to your carriers and negotiating these freight hikes when they're coming, and this is a great tool to do this. With that wraps up our presentation. I think Joe is going to take on any, see if there's any questions, and then I can answer them.
Larry, thanks. Guys, you did a great job. Let's do a little bit of Q&A. If you have a question and have not submitted it yet, please enter it in the GoToMeeting chat panel there on your right and send it. Larry, we have a couple of questions for you right now. First one is, it looks like you are connected to numerous carriers in the cloud, but what if a shipper uses a local trucker that does not have web service API to connect to?
What we can do there to support the connection is we can actually take a rate table and put it in the cloud. That's not our preference, but obviously there are truckers that don't necessarily have this web services API capability, so we can take a tariff table and put it in the cloud and do a rating off of it just as if you're connecting directly to the carrier. That's a static table, however, and there's some disadvantages to it, but working with the local trucker, that's probably an okay solution.
Excellent. At this time we have one more. Do the regional parcel carriers use the new DIMS, D-I-M-S, pricing method as well?
Actually, some will negotiate away from that, but yes, they do. But it's interesting, the way they handle it is they'll have a different DIM factor. So in our example, we had a DIM factor of UPS and FedEx use a DIM factor of 166. So I think we calculated it as a weight of 11 pounds. What the regional carriers use for the most part is a higher DIM factor. I think it's 194 or something like that. So that same calculation, because the DIM factor is higher, will result in a lower build weight. So yes, some of them use DIM factors, but they are typically a higher DIM factor resulting in a lower build rate than FedEx and UPS.
Excellent. Thank you. Folks, that concludes the questions at this time. Again, if you have any additional questions that pop up, please send those to me. Those will be coming into our email box, which is info@godlan.com. And we will get those forwarded to Larry so that he can answer it, and we'll fire the questions right back to you. Also, if you'd like to see the presentation in its recorded fashion, please shoot a note there as well, and I'll make sure that that comes to you as soon as we have it ready, usually within a day or so. Again, info@godlan.com. I'd like to thank you for making the time to join us today. I'd like to thank our presenters, Larry and Luke, and we look forward to having you with us again next time. Have a great day.